Hello, and welcome back to Behind the Music, where we take an inside look at the music you'll hear on North Carolina Symphony programs. My name is Wesley Schulz, Associate Conductor of your North Carolina Symphony. This weekend, the Symphony will perform Ludwig van Beethoven's Violin Concerto, conducted by Aram Demerjen and featuring one of our favorite returning guest artists, Augustin Hladlik. The Symphony is excited to share this performance on Saturday, May 8th at 8 p.m. As you likely know by now, 2020 was a big year for Ludwig van Beethoven in that it was the 250th anniversary of his birth. Here at the North Carolina Symphony, like orchestras across the world, we wanted to celebrate. And though the pandemic disrupted some of our plans, we decided to carry the celebration over into 2021. Earlier this season, the Symphony shared a performance of Beethoven's Septet, featuring guest violinist James Ennis. On this program, and programs to come, we are going to continue to highlight the music of Beethoven. So let's get started in exploring this weekend's program. The first two pieces are presented as a pair. One is by Beethoven, and the other is by living composer Carlos Simon. The piece by Beethoven is the second movement allegretto of his Seventh Symphony, completed in April 1813. Though this movement is placed second in the symphony, the traditional place reserved for a slow movement, it is not in fact slow, but rather unfolds at a leisurely pace, hence the allegretto marking. The first sound heard is an A minor chord, but positioned upside down, with the top of the chord placed in the bottom of the orchestration, causing the ear to hear the music as unstable. After this unusual opening call, we get a theme and variations. When I talked about Beethoven's Septet last fall, I mentioned how theme and variations are near and dear to Beethoven. If you remember, he began his career first as a pianist before investing himself more fully in composition. Perhaps as a result of this, he loved to improvise. Theme and variations are essentially capturing improvisations on paper. Here in the Seventh Symphony's allegretto, we get a minor key theme that starts quietly in the violas, cellos, and basses, and with each subsequent variation, he adds more instruments. First, he adds the second violins, while the violas detour to a counter melody, then the first violins, then the full orchestra at full volume. A secondary theme, lyrical and set in the parallel key of A major, provides a respite from the variations theme. The rest of the piece unfolds with these two themes alternating and further developing. Both themes, by the way, are carried along with a persistent rhythm, bum, 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 beam, bum, which leads us to Carlos Simon's piece titled Fate Now Conquers. Simon composed this work on commission from the Philadelphia Orchestra in 2020 and took Beethoven as his inspiration. Now, for most of his life, Beethoven kept journals, or what have also been called conversation books. Many of them have been preserved. In them, he sketched musical ideas, he jotted down favorite lines from literature, and he also used them to communicate with friends as he slowly lost his hearing. Carlos Simon was struck by one particular entry from 1815, in which Beethoven copied down a short passage from Homer's The Iliad. That passage reads, "But fate now conquers. I am hers, and yet not she shall share in my renown. That life is left to every noble spirit, and that some great deed shall beget that all lives shall inherit." End quote. Carlos Simon believes that regardless of the reason why Beethoven recorded this passage in his journal, it seems that Beethoven relinquished to his fate. Thus, fate now conquers. Beethoven's Seventh Symphony uses a persistent rhythm to carry along its melodies. Simon also uses recurring rhythms, in particular, a fanfare motive in the brass and woodwinds, but also pulsating and driving rhythms in the strings. Simon also incorporates the harmonic structure of Beethoven's allegretto to give his own piece its structure. Further elements to listen for in this performance are block harmonies in the woodwinds, scalar passages that race around the string orchestra, and the relentlessness of the timpani, another nod to Beethoven who was one of the first to use timpani as a true musical instrument and not just harmonic reinforcement. And, well, speaking of timpani, let's move on to the final and most substantial piece on this program, Beethoven's Concerto in D major for violin and orchestra, which begins with 5 soft strokes from the timpanist. Augustin Adlerich, one of the world's finest violinists, will be our soloist. The year 1806 was one of Beethoven's most prolific years, in which he composed masterpiece after masterpiece, including 3 string quartets, the Fourth Symphony, the Fourth Piano Concerto, a revised opera, and at the very end of 1806, the Violin Concerto. It was premiered in December and was written for a young violin prodigy by the name of Franz Clement. Beethoven first met Clement when Clement was just 13 years old. In a keepsake of Clement's, Beethoven wrote an inscription after hearing him play, and it reads, "Go forth on the way in which you hitherto have traveled so beautifully, so magnificently. Nature and art vie with each other in making you a great artist." End quote. Clement was known for the grace and beauty he brought to his playing. In France, there was a growing movement of technical virtuosity in violin playing that came as a result of improvements made to the violin, such as a longer fingerboard, a higher bridge, and a stronger bow. But at the time of Beethoven's Violin Concerto, Clement was still playing on older instruments, which did not necessarily have the power and brilliance of the newer French instruments. Clement's virtuosity came from his ability to sing through his instrument. He was adept at playing high up on the E string and was known for his beautiful ornamentations. So in looking at Beethoven's concerto, it is clear that Clement and his style of violin playing influenced how it was written. The first movement opens with those 5 soft pulses from the timpani I mentioned earlier. Woodwinds then enter with a melody marked dolce, or sweetly. These opening gestures set the agenda for the balance of the concerto. First, that the timpani motive is integral and will recur throughout the first movement, and second, that Beethoven is showing us a different side of his personality. This is not a concerto driven by an obsession with fate. It is not dramatic. There is no struggle that must be solved. The focus, as illustrated by this opening theme, is on simplicity, yet radical beauty. The first movement is substantial. It often clocks in between 25 and 27 minutes in length. After a generous orchestral introduction, the violin enters discreetly, improvising before taking up the main melody first given to us by the woodwinds at the outset. And when the soloist delivers the main melody, it is performed in the stratosphere range of the violin, like being out on a high wire. The second theme is shared between the soloist and the orchestra, and it too is presented dolce and with great splendor. This sharing of the theme, again, is a reminder that Beethoven's Violin Concerto is different than others. Instead of presenting the soloist as a tour de force, the soloist is a commentator or a decorator. Inheriting themes already presented by the orchestra, the violinist expands upon them with delicacy and tenderness. A cadenza is indicated toward the end of the movement. Now, Beethoven did not write one, so violinists tend to bring their own or perform those composed by other violinists or composers. We'll look forward to hearing what Augustin presents. The second movement is slower in tempo, but it is not an adagio, merely larghetto. The atmosphere of the movement is restrained and uncomplicated. The form of the movement is yet again Beethoven's favorite, theme and variations. The theme is presented by the orchestra alone, and when the soloist enters for the first variation, he plays embellishments, while the horns and then the clarinets take care of playing the tune. So again, we hear how Clement's style of playing influenced Beethoven's composition of this concerto. At the end of the second movement, a small cadenza is indicated, and it leads directly into the finale, a rondo. In this movement, Beethoven brings back his easy and youthful approach, giving us a light-hearted close to this magnificent concerto. The music is in 6/8 and evokes the feel of dance. In style, I think this movement is a preview of the country dance Beethoven will later write in his Sixth Symphony, the Pastorale. There is one final opportunity for cadenza in this movement before a thrilling coda brings the concerto to a celebratory conclusion. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of the works of Beethoven and Carlos Simon that you'll hear on this weekend's performance. The concert streams on Saturday, May 8th at 8 p.m. and will be available for 20 days following. Thank you for your support of the North Carolina Symphony and enjoy the performance.